What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Fun with Friends podcast. I'm your host, Allie. I hope you're all doing well, having a good time. We've got another travel snacks for you today, which means Geneva of Unwrap Your Map is in the house. And if you're new here, we've done a few episodes with Geneva before, including episode 10 of season 2. And there are some other travel snacks out there for you to devour. So be sure to check those out. And I hope you don't get tired of snack-like puns because I'm going to work in as many of those as I possibly can. If you're asking yourself what the hell is a travel snack, well, don't worry, you're in the right spot. This is the Fun with Friends podcast. And Geneva is a fantastic guest and has a ton of excellent information to share. Plus, we really enjoy podcasting together. So we thought it would be fun. Why not do a series of 4 or 5 episodes called Travel Snacks that are about 30 minutes long each, and they're centered around specific travel topics. So if this is your first travel snack, welcome. And if you've been here before, thanks for coming back. And Geneva, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again.
Thanks for having me again. This is actually one of my favorite little topics because this is one of my favorite challenges to focus on. So I'm excited to dig into the packing situation with you.
Yes, today we are talking about packing, and Geneva is going to share all of her packing secrets, or at least some of them, to help us overpackers out, because it's a real serious problem I have. I am a terrible packer, and am one of those people who I essentially throw everything I own into a suitcase. And then over like a 3 or 4 day period, I go back every day and remove things until I feel like I have whittled down my wardrobe to a manageable size. And it's quite sad. So I'm excited that you're here to share your packing secrets. You're somewhat of like a packing pro, like as a self-proclaimed packing. What was the term?
Yeah, someone once referred to me as the most organized backpacker, and they said that I should have an award for being the most organized backpacker. And so I was kind of dubbed most organized backpacker. My situation, I'll be honest, it does when I'm on point, my bag looks good, and people walk by and they're like, whoa, like, what is that? And I'm like, this here is my backpack. And I'll get into it a little bit more, but yeah, someone in Australia once in my hostel was like, you should get an award for the most organized backpacker. And I was like, well, I should, and I will. And in this moment, we shall dub me the most organized backpacker.
You have been dubbed officially. You've got like packing down to a science, and can stay abroad for like months or even years with your backpack. And that blows my mind because, like I said, I overpack for just like a week-long vacation somewhere, and it's a shit show. But before we like jump into everything, because we're going to be saying like long-term travel quite a bit. And so I wanted to kind of define what we mean when we say long-term travel. And I mean, I guess in my mind, that means traveling consistency for like 2 to 3 months. Is that typically kind of what long-term travel means?
Yeah, to me, I mean, when I talk about long-term travel, I'm often talking about anything, 2 to 3 months of, kind of hitting multiple destinations, or even 2 to 3 months where you're exploring one area, anywhere up to, a year-long work visa in another country or something. So I do tend to think generally I start with 3 months as the baseline, but, 3 months of travel, roughly all the way up to a year of living somewhere else. But I mean, really, it could be anything longer than your standard 2-week vacation is kind of what I picture, where you might be hitting more than one location, because your average person will go on a vacation for 1, maybe 2 weeks, and it'll just be in one location, and they'll just have a certain type of item for that one trip, that one destination, and that'll be it. So when I do think longer term, I think either multi-destination or a more extended period of time. So 2+ months. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So when you hear say long-term travel, think 2+ months, multiple locations, just hitting as many places as you can, having a fucking amazing time. So that's what we're talking about when we say long-term travel. And to kick things off, like, I really want to know, have you always been a super efficient packer, or was it something that like took you time to like learn and like hone that skill?
Okay, this is funny because I did an online interview for Authority magazine at one point, and this came up in one of the first questions. But I actually, growing up, I was kind of the designated family car packer. So whenever my family was going on and I don't know, I might have mentioned this in season 2, episode 10. I think
now
I did. Yeah.
Say it, I'm like, oh yeah.
I was like, I feel like this has come up. Yeah. I was the designated family car packer. So whenever my family was going on a little trip growing up, they would all prepare their bags and then dump them on the sidewalk. And I'd go out there, and I was the one who was responsible for putting it all in the car because I had this eye for space, and I could just look at the trunk of our car and go, all right, look at the bags and say, okay, this is where this needs to go. That's where that needs to go. And it was like a game of Tetris. I would just put everything in the car and it would all fit perfectly. And if anyone else in my family tried to pack it, things would be falling out. Things would be like hitting you in the back of the head in the van, so I don't know. I've just always had this eye for space and for fitting things in spaces. And so it's always been a weird but entertaining challenge for me to try and make things work with limited space. So yes, I've kind of always had an eye for it and a knack for it. And I think that's definitely made my packing situation slightly smoother as I've learned to live out of my backpack and just work with small spaces. Yeah.
I don't know if I used to think I had like an eye for space. I used to, maybe. But when it comes to a suitcase, I don't know what I think my brain goes into like, maybe it's an anxiety thing or like, I don't know, but I'm always like, oh, I got to take as much as like possible because I don't know what's going to happen in my travels or what I might need. And so and then it's just a spiral from there. Like I've even tried like packing cubes. And I mean, you really can't fuck up with those, right? Like it's a set amount of space.
You'd be surprised. People can totally mess up with packing cubes.
I'm one of those people.
Hit or miss. Yeah. Sometimes I'm a big fan of them and other times I'm not. It depends on how you're using them. That's what I think, but I'll get into that. But yeah.
I don't use them properly. I don't think, but I am a habitual overpacker for trips of all lengths of time. And I will say, I think I'm getting a little better, but it's because I have someone here, Katie, like I will bring her into the room, show her my suitcase, and I will go, what do I and don't I need? And she'll help me like, pare down.
Yeah.
Because I cannot do it on my own. But for people who are overpackers, or maybe they're going on like their first long-term trip, what are some kind of like essential tips that you have when it comes to packing and starting to get into that packing routine?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll use routine.
Well, to be honest, you hit on something that is actually a really good way to go about it. You had said that you start putting everything out there and then you kind of whittle it down over time. And that actually is something I do recommend people do, because if you start packing, a little bit in advance, depending on how long your trip is, you'll start getting the ideas going beforehand. And what I recommend is that people actually do initially pull out everything it is that you think you might want. What is it that you can pull out the wants first. And then ultimately you've got way too much stuff. You always will. You'll always have way too much stuff laid out in front of you. But then you think, okay, what is it out of this that I actually need? And you kind of separate out the needs from the wants. And then you've got two separate piles. And then you look at it and you say, okay, well, what is it that can work for multiple purposes? And then kind of separate things out again. This will work for multiple scenarios. I can dress it up. I can dress it down. It's good for water. It's good for walking. It's good for whatever, and you kind of compartmentalize things into different categories, needs versus wants versus versatility and such like that. And then you kind of start to look at things a little bit differently. And then all of a sudden the things that are in your want pile will start to look like, well, actually that really only serves one purpose at one given time, or it's way too big. It takes up too much space. And so you'll start to look at the wants very differently than the needs and the things that are versatile and the things that are, practical for multiple scenarios. And essentially you do start whittling it down from there. So it doesn't hurt to always kind of put everything out in front of you at first and just say, this is all the stuff I ideally have with me. And then over time, you start to pare it down. You start to, basically look at it and say, what is necessary? What is just, for luxurious purposes, and it does become easier to kind of look at it from that perspective. And in terms of overpacking, I mean, less is more. And I think knowing that it's going to be easier for you as a traveler to have less with you and move around with less makes you want to bring less, because if you try and actually visualize yourself carrying everything that you've laid out in front of you through an airport or onto a train or onto a bus, and there's going to be these moments where you think, oh my gosh, I can't physically drag all this luggage with me. And that kind of changes your perspective on it as well. It makes you want to bring less so that it's easier for you to move around. And quite honestly, I found that you'll save your back, you'll save your, your mental state, you'll save everything when you do pack with a lighter perspective in mind. So definitely a couple things that are important are to think about layers, to think about versatility, to think about practicality, to think about multi-purpose, stuff like that. And I'll probably get into that a little bit more, but I think those are the main things to be aware of when it comes to changing your overpacking mindset to a more minimalist mindset.
Maybe some other folks have this problem too, but it's definitely one for me. And you and I have talked about this before. I don't know how to dress myself, or, if I had my druthers, I would literally, like in the summertime, wear nothing but like sweat shorts and t-shirts. And then when I went to Scotland, I was like, okay, well, it's going to be cold, but I know I get hot when I'm walking around, even if it's cold outside. And so I was like, well, I want to take warm clothes, but I know I'm also going to get hot. So I want to take clothes that are like between clothes, if that makes sense. I don't know what to call it, like lightweight sweaters, maybe. But I ended up taking like a big ass suitcase, just like packed full of shit to Scotland. And I think I ended up wearing, and it was only 2 weeks. It was only 2 weeks. And I took this big ass suitcase that I had like 4 pairs of shoes in there, the bulkiest sweaters I owned mixed with the lightest sweaters I owned, with, just like all kinds of shit. And I think I wore the same pair of jeans the entire time I was there, and the same 3 sweaters, and only 1 pair of shoes. I wore the same shoes every single day.
That's the thing, because, and to be honest, a person shouldn't necessarily pack all that differently for a long-term trip than they would for a short-term trip, if they're keeping in mind things that they actually wear and that they actually use in their day-to-day life. It's so funny to me because a lot of times somebody will pull out a shirt that they haven't worn in 2 years and go, I need to bring this because it's going to be great for X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, when is the last time you even wore that? And they're like, I haven't worn it. Well, if you don't wear it, don't bring it. Because if you don't wear it at home, you're probably not going to wear it where you're going, And it's funny because everyone does revert back to that most comfy pair of jeans, and they'll wear that every day, or their most comfortable shirt, or their favorite sweater. And if those are things that are most comfortable to you, and if you wear them every day anyway, bring it with you, because you're going to keep wearing it wherever you're going. It's just, it becomes silly when someone's thinking about bringing something that they just don't normally wear, because the reality is you're going to want to be just as comfortable away as you are at home. And if there's things that you already know that you revert to at home, those are going to be things that you're probably going to want to bring with you, actually. So yeah, it's kind of hilarious to hear you say that.
I am that person. And in my mind, I'm always like, oh, well, I haven't worn this in so long or whatever, but I'm going to a new place. Maybe I'll feel like being adventurous in my clothing choices, and I'll like put it in there. And then, no, I'm not going to.
Yeah, exactly. And here's what I have to say about that. If you really think you're going to be feeling that adventurous when you're there, maybe buy something there. Support a local business when you're on this place in this new area. And if you really feel like you need to treat yourself for something that's so different than what you brought with you, I challenge you to find something that's so worth it there that you decide to buy it there instead of having brought it from home. And then it becomes a souvenir. And, if you really want it, that's one way to do it. But
I like that. I like that little piece of advice. That's a good one. Have you ever, because this is one of my like worries, of course, and probably why I have a tendency to overpack, but have you ever found yourself traveling or in a situation where you have wished that you had packed something?
I'll be honest, it hasn't happened a ton, but it will happen to every person on every trip, no matter if you pack really light and pack minimalist, or if you're an overpacker, it's always going to happen that you're going to say, oh, I wish I had this one thing with me. It's unavoidable. It really is. So the reality is accept that it's going to happen, accept that you can't possibly bring everything, because even if you did, you'd still wish you had this one item at some point in your trip, with that, knowing that in mind. But honestly, the few times I did, it was things that I wanted, but I didn't necessarily need. It was something where, a group of people were saying, okay, we're going to go out to a restaurant and it's kind of nicer. And they're all getting dressed up maybe. And I'll be like, oh, I didn't really bring a whole lot of nicer things because that's not really my style, but I just met these people and I want to go with them. So a lot of times it was things for those kind of scenarios, but there was often always something I could make work in what I had. And it was like, look, it's not my ideal. It's not what I'd most like to be wearing, but I can make it work out of these things that I do have with me. Or you'd be surprised how many times people are like, look, I've got this thing you can borrow. I have always had someone in the group probably offer to give me something to wear. That it actually happened like 3 weeks ago when I was in Chicago with a couple other travel coaches. And I said, look, I'm working in a national park for the summer. I basically just have some very casual, comfy clothes with me. I do not have anything nice for going out. And they had, every single one of them contributed something. And I ended up wearing shoes from one person, a dress from someone else, a bag from someone else. And basically my entire outfit was made up of the people around me. But that's awesome. The joy of traveling sometimes too, is you make great friends and you become friends quickly and people are willing to, share, and they all understand they're all in the same boat. So everybody has been in that scenario at some point or another where they have wished they had something that they didn't have on them, and someone's probably helped them out. And in those moments, you'll be surprised how generous people are willing to be when they understand your circumstances. And it's it becomes fun too. It becomes part of the experience, someone loaning you something and everybody going, oh yeah, you should wear this and that, and people contributing. So it's not something worth worrying about, if you ask me, because again, it'll lead to overpacking, which in the long run won't be worth it for that one moment that you realize there was one thing you wish you had with you, when you'd be surprised to find people are willing to donate that to use for the night, so it makes for a good story, I think.
Yeah, adds to the experience. And I like that. I feel like most travelers, especially solo travelers, are like a good group of people. And absolutely, like you said, are willing to kind of like band together to help someone out. So I like that. It's just kind of like an added bonus to the whole experience.
Do you know what goes great with listening to podcasts? If you said a warm drink, you're absolutely right. Just imagine you're sitting back, you're listening to your favorite podcast, all while holding a nice, cute-ass mug in your hand with your favorite hot beverage in it. If you're wondering, where can I get a mug like that? Well, you're in luck. You can swing by the Coots Creations Cute Coffee and Tea Mugs Etsy shop. They've got everything from enamel coffee cups to travel mugs, all featuring adorable original artwork. Head over to etsy.com/shop/Coots Creations and use promo code WANDER for 10% off any mug.
So when it comes to go-to items, I'm trying to think of like what my go-to items are, but honestly, it's at this point in my life, it is literally sweatshorts.
Hey, but if it's sweatshorts, as long as you know that it's sweatshorts and as long as you bring sweatshorts with you.
Yeah, like I went to Mexico and I took 3 or 4 pairs of sweatshorts. And when I went to Nebraska recently, I did the same. And I was like, this is all I need, like sweatshorts and some t-shirts, and like, I'm good to go. So
there you go.
Apparently in the warmer months, that is my go-to. But I'm curious as to kind of what are some of your go-to items that you always take with you, especially for those longer trips?
Right. So, there's a couple things obviously that are absolutely necessary. So you do need shoes, you do need some kind of tops, some kind of bottoms, some kind of sweaters, some kind of jackets. But in terms of specific things, I always have a packable jacket, usually one of these kind of lightweight micro puff type jackets that has a packable pocket. And I'll basically pack that jacket into that pocket. So it doesn't take a whole lot of space in your backpack, but it also kind of doubles as a pillow on the plane, plain pillow. Exactly. It doubles as a plain pillow, but it's an extra layer as well. So I'll always have a packable jacket in whatever backpack I'm traveling with. I always bring my camera. I always have a little small first aid pouch with just a couple of basic things. I do, and this is different for everyone, but, I always talk about, bringing things that you can kind of dress up and dress down. But a lot of my clothing is very casual. I have a lot of just tank tops, t-shirts, lightweight sweaters, all of which is part of my layering, basics basically. And I will always bring scarves as well. Not many, but maybe 2 that are kind of versatile. And those will be my ways of dressing things up. So I'll have my normal tank top with a t-shirt over it, with a lightweight sweater over it in the colder places. And then I'll throw a scarf over all of that. And it's kind of, something. I'll usually pick a scarf that can be dressed up basically, or that can serve as dressing up, but
scarves are also good for like covering shoulders or, hair.
Exactly. Yeah. They come in handy for so many different things. I've used them. Smart. Yeah. I'll have kind of one that, I'm comfortable getting dirty, but that can also be washed as well. So like sometimes I've used a scarf when you're randomly walking by a beach and you just want to go sit out in the sun at the beach for a little bit. I'll have a scarf that I'm okay with throwing down in the sand, sitting on it for a little bit, and then taking it back to the hostel and washing it. But also a scarf that's nice or fun enough that I can wear it for a night out or a nice meal, but also something I can use to cover my shoulders if I'm in a country where that's appropriate. But yeah, they come in handy for so many different things. Also just kind of like as like a lightweight layer when you're on a plane and they've got the aircon going, just something to kind of provide an extra layer, or even just like cover your head if you're sleeping on a train or a bus or something and you've got a long way to go. Good way to block out the light. So they come in handy for a lot. So I'll always travel with scarves, and then a bandana as well. Like I've got a couple of different bandanas with different prints on them, but I always take bandanas with me because they're also something that come in really handy. And I don't know, this is going to sound kind of silly, but back in the day, people used to use a handkerchief as kind of as a tissue, like if their nose is running or something. And I have allergies. So everywhere I go, I've had, runny noses, but I've kind of switched over to this handkerchief type of thing. And I use bandanas sometimes as a handkerchief, and it's sustainable because you're not going through tissues and you can just wash it and whatever. But I mean, honestly, bandanas are another thing that just work for so many different things. They, again, are kind of, and especially at the moment where, masks are occasionally required and occasionally not, depending on where you are. But a bandana often can be used as a face covering. It can be used as a handkerchief. It can be used as like a quick towel to dry your hands. I mean, not after you've been using it as a handkerchief, of course, but there's so many scenarios where they come in handy. If you're washing your own reusable water bottle, or if you have your own reusable utensils, which you should, these are other things I always have with me. You can use it as just like a quick hand towel, or to dry your dishes or your water bottle or whatever it may be. But handkerchiefs, bandanas, whatever it is, they do come in handy for a lot of different things, just kind of as a quick little towel. So yeah, packable jacket, bandana, scarves, reusable utensils, water bottles, camera, first aid bag, and all that good stuff. Those are things that I do not ever travel without.
I'm just thinking back to like Mexico, because it was so hot and I sweat a lot. Like I'm one of those people. If I'm standing and it's warm outside, I'm sweating a lot. And I definitely could have used the bandana or 5.
That's the thing. They're washable. Honestly, you can use them for anything, for soaking up sweat, for blowing your nose, for wiping down a table in a public place. Like just wash it when you get back to your hostel or whatever, and they're so small too that you can wash them in the sink easily. Just hand wash them, soak them in hot water, pour hot water over them and just rinse them out with some soap or something. They're very easy to clean and they dry quickly because they're thin. Just wring them out when you're done and shake them out and hang them to dry, and they're dry by the next morning. Yeah.
And so to stay on like the clothing kind of topic, what do you recommend? Well, this is kind of a very open-ended question, because it depends a lot on where you're planning to travel for sure. But what are some kind of items that you would recommend that people take with them when it comes to packing clothing, besides scarves, bandanas, and the lightweight jacket?
At this point now, I pretty much pack the same things no matter where I'm going, which it actually makes things a little bit easier. But look, unless you're only going to a hot place or only going to a cold place, then really there's a whole bunch of things that kind of work in all scenarios that are worth bringing for every destination and for all weather types. And so obviously, if you are going specifically to a hot destination, there are things you will bring for that. If you're going specifically to a cold destination, there are things you will bring for that. But if you're hitting multiple places or covering a lot of ground over an extended period of time, to be honest, you're going to need both things for both scenarios anyway. And a lot of these things work in all cases. And this is where the layering and the versatility become really important, because when it comes to layering, more layers helps you in the colder locations, less layers for the warmer destinations. But if you bring the same stuff, you've got it for both scenarios. So always some tank tops, t-shirts, which can be worn over your tank tops, lightweight sweaters, and definitely, obviously you do need a couple pairs of shoes. But as far as packing from a clothing perspective, and obviously this is going to be different for everybody depending on what your personal style is and what kinds of things you're comfortable with wearing in different places. But as far as trying to be minimalist with it, going with a capsule wardrobe is really going to be helpful. So what I mean by a capsule wardrobe is deciding on a couple of set things that work in multiple scenarios that are versatile across all boards. So that includes choosing colors and textures and patterns that work together. Now, I realize this is kind of getting into a more fashionable perspective, but it actually does come in handy too when you're using things that are entirely.
Some of us need it in Geneva. We need both packing and fashion help.
Oh gosh. I mean, a lot of people already have certain colors that they tend to wear every day anyway, right? You know, everybody's got their colors that they tend to repeat. And whatever those colors are, those are going to be colors you're going to want to bring with you because again, they're the colors you're most comfortable in. But ideally, they a lot of times kind of work together as well. So whether it's earthy tones like olive green, tan, gray, and black, you know, gray and black work with everything too, which is really helpful. So like I tend to have a lot of maroons, a lot of navies, a lot of gray, and a lot of black. And also olive greens sometimes. And some of those things work together. Some of them don't, but a capsule wardrobe, if you're trying to go with that kind of mindset, then choosing colors that work well together and having everything kind of have that ability to go together when you're using it.
Yeah. So I have like a very weird wardrobe, which no surprise because I don't know what I'm doing, but I do have a tendency to stick with, you know, like darker colors. And then every now and then I'll have like a fucking like bright yellow shirt or tie-dye shirt or something like wild like that. But I had seen recently that reversible, like lightweight or like easy to wear reversible clothing is kind of like becoming a thing for travelers. Do you like know anything about that, or have you kind of like encountered that?
Yeah, so that's actually really important because it has been becoming a thing, and there's a small designer who's actually started a collection about that, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is very cool. But the whole lightweight and easy wash thing is something else to add to kind of what I was talking about with clothing in general, because when you are traveling pretty extensively and picking up and moving every couple of days, you do want stuff that is super easy to wash and is going to dry quickly as well if you do have to kind of hang dry it, because there's a lot of places that you'll go that don't actually use dryers. So in the US, we get very comfortable with having washers and dryers be very accessible. And then when you go to Europe, you have these kind of dual washer dryer things that basically take out the majority of the moisture in your clothing after it's been washed, but it doesn't necessarily fully dry it. It just kind of gives a little bit of fluff and air to it, but then you'll still have to kind of hang things for a little bit. And then when you travel over to Asia, for example, dryers are not frequently used anyway, because it's so sunny and hot that you can just hang things outside. So definitely when it comes to specific clothing that you're bringing with you, think about how easy it's going to be to wash it, to clean it, but also to dry it. And so certain materials are going to be easier for drying than others, but definitely look at the weight of the object. To be honest, this is actually why I don't recommend that people bring sweatshirts, like hooded sweatshirts with them, unless it's something that they wear all the time and that they know they're going to be living in. I actually don't frequently recommend that people bring sweatshirts because A, they take up a ton of space in your bag if they've got a hood, and B, they take a long time to dry, especially if it's like a double layered hood or something in it. It does help to bring some kind of a thicker layer. But sweatshirts are something I actually tend to shy away from just because of the space they take up and the amount of time they take to dry. And the fact that, you know, a couple layers of something different that dry quickly could also suffice in terms of the warmth factor. But yes, in terms of reversible clothing, there's actually a girl who's started a collection of reversible travel clothing that's all lightweight and quick drying. And I've got quite a few pieces, actually. I think I have all of her first collection, but she's new and she's started kind of making these amazing pieces that are targeted for travelers and backpackers and people that are doing long-term trips. And it's all got set colorways. So it kind of brings back to that capsule wardrobe I was talking about, where basically all the pieces work well together. They're all colors that work well together. And they're all, you know, kind of parts of these reversible pieces that can make a bigger collection of clothing. And there's a number of different combinations you can do when it comes to something like that. So yeah, I actually, you know, I talk with her occasionally, and I kind of am an affiliate for her clothing line as well now. So I don't know, I can even pass that information along to you. And if you want to include it in any, notes or details for the podcast, that would be cool. Because if anyone wants to find it, I basically have a link that they can get 15% off their purchase as well, which is pretty cool. And I'm a big fan of, they've got this tunic top, which I really like because it's kind of long, and that's more my style. And it ends up kind of covering, if you're wearing, it's good for over leggings or jeans or something like that. And the length of it is something that makes it easily dressed up or dressed down. I definitely am a big fan of these kind of reversible capsule wardrobe concepts. So
super versatile. And definitely we will include the link in the episode description, because I'm definitely going to check it out because I need all the help I can get.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to, I like that it's like everything's kind of like color coordinated and interchangeable. Mm-hmm. And, the last thing I want to, honestly, when it comes to traveling, the last thing I want to worry about is really like my clothes. I want to just be able to like throw shit into a suitcase and go. So
absolutely. And actually,
easier the better.
Yeah. And it's funny. I don't know why I didn't think to mention this, but actually one of my favorite items from this brand, it's called Splice Clothing. One of my favorite items from this brand is actually a poncho that they have. And it's incredible. It is now that I have it, so I use it, you can use it as a scarf. It's like it would be more of a heavy winter scarf than anything else. So like if you're going to a cold destination, it'd be really good for that. But you can tie it like a scarf. You can tie it kind of like you can wear it like a poncho to the side or to the front. But it also is so comfortable. I use it like a blanket when I'm flying as well. Like I literally just put it over me, and it is, oh my gosh, it is so comfortable. So, but I also sometimes, like if I'm not cold, I'll wrap it up and I'll stick it behind my back or behind my head as like a pillow. It is so comfy, and it truly does work for so many different things. And I was so on the fence about buying it at first, because I was like, I've never worn a poncho. I don't know if I can pull this off. And I was kind of looking at it like, oh, is that going to be right for me? It turns out I love it. And I cannot now at the moment, like I pack it everywhere I go. I've got it right here. I've got it here in Colorado with me, actually. It's become one of my go-to items. And it's sad because I bought it during COVID, so I haven't even had anywhere to bring it yet and use it. But I brought it here to Colorado. So, I'm bringing it on small trips, but it's like the perfect all around. It's like a blanket. It's a scarf. It's a layer of warmth. It's so cool. And it's gray. It's my dark gray color. It's kind of a charcoal on one side, and the other side is like a white gray heather, more of a heatherish. But yeah, it's my favorite thing. So yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely
spend money I don't need to spend.
But on really practical things. And that actually does bring me to one other point. There is something I tell every traveler, first time backpacker, anyone who's looking to pack long-term for the first time. I say, to be honest, there's a lot of scenarios where, look, I don't want to call myself cheap, but I have been called cheap. Okay. I don't spend
frugal.
A lot of money. Yeah. Frugal is the word. Thank you. But I do spend good money on good things. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this is something I encourage people to not go cheaply on when they're packing for their first long-term trip. I do say, look, this is stuff that you could potentially be using for a very long time, and it does not hurt to spend money. It's actually, I encourage people to spend money when it comes to packing for their first trip, because the reality is, there are certain brands that make things that are better quality and that are more built to be practical for these scenarios. So a packable jacket, for example, you can find a packable jacket anywhere, but is it actually going to be warm? Is it actually going to be water repellent? And is it actually going to be durable? Mm-hmm. Maybe not. You can go to, Walmart and get one for $15, but it's not going to last you more than a couple of weeks when you're really out there and taking your backpack off and on and jumping on trains and planes and whatever. But, if you spend good money on a better branded one, it will be warm enough that you don't need a huge puffer jacket. You just need one of these lightweight ones over whatever it is that you're packing already. And so sometimes you do have to spend good money for things that have that practical nature, that are good for backpacking. And I honestly, before any trip, I do end up spending a good amount of money on good quality things that will last me, that will be warm enough, that will be water repellent, that will be durable, that will be quick drying, that will be, all of these things. And you do sometimes have to spend money to get value out of things, and consider it an investment. That is what I tell people, because buying a whole bunch of cheap stuff might last you a couple of weeks, but buying a whole bunch of good quality things could last you years. I use some of the same stuff that I've been using for 5-6 years because it was built to last, because it's good quality it's good quality stuff. So yeah, this is one of those times where I do tell people not to skimp really, but to be willing to spend money because it'll last them in the long run.
I imagine, do you have any kind of like recommendations when it comes to bags or backpacks or packs?
Yeah. So obviously it depends on the kind of trip you're doing. But again, if you're talking about a long-term trip, I do opt for backpacks. And I'll be honest, I never owned a backpack like of this sort, like a big, multi-liter backpack. I didn't own something like that until I started backpacking, until I first traveled Europe. I bought one right before that trip. And I started with a 65 liter, which was a good size, but it's funny because over the years I've actually dropped down. I now have a 55 liter. Actually, no, that's not even true. It's a 40 liter with a small expansion pack. So I think it actually only goes up to about 50 liters, but it's perfect. It's the perfect size for me now. And the reality is you have to think about your own health in the long run as well. And again, spending money on a good quality, well-made backpack that fits properly is going to be better for your back and better for yourself, better for your joints, better for everything. And rolly suitcases are great, but there's a lot of scenarios under which, again, if you're jumping on and off escalators and in and out of planes and trains and buses, that's where it does become handy to literally have everything on your body, on your person. It becomes easier to move around, to navigate cities. And if you're walking on sidewalks or in countries that don't have sidewalks, sometimes it becomes really difficult to try and drag a rolling suitcase with you. And, when I was living in Cambodia, for example, I try and imagine walking around there with a rolling suitcase, and it would have been a disaster because, there's not sidewalks like we have paved sidewalks here. It's a little bit different. So I have gotten quite accustomed to just walking around with a backpack. And I do find it to be the most easily navigable way to kind of get around and get on and off transportation and around cities. So I do recommend that people opt for backpacks, but whatever makes them more comfortable. A rolly suitcase is definitely doable in a lot of places. But when it comes to backpacks, the number one recommendation I tell people is that they should get a backpack that has a front loading zip. So a zip that they can open in the front and basically access everything from the inside that way instead of a top loading. Because if you have a top loading, if you need something on the bottom of that bag, you are going to have to make a mess in the process to get everything out, to get whatever's at the bottom. Whereas if you have a front loading, you can pull things out from basically all areas of the backpack. And yeah, I guess I haven't really covered much about specific packing tips, but long story short, when it comes to having a front loading pack, everything should have a designated place in your bag. And if you keep everything exactly where you initially determined that it should go, you will always be able to find things. You will never lose anything. And if things have designated places that they're always sitting, then it becomes easier to repack every single time that you find yourself needing to repack. And to be honest, that's how I was labeled most organized backpacker by that one person that one time in that hostel in Australia, was because my backpack was open.
Hang on to it.
I'm riding that wave. I'll ride that wave for as long as I travel. But the flap was open on my backpack. The front loading flap was open, and all my clothes are folded neatly in the center of that flap, basically. And then to the right side, I have a packing cube that has all my socks. And to the left side, I have a packing cube that has all my underwear. And to the top, I have a packing cube that has my swimsuits. And to the bottom, I have a packing cube that has my shoes. And so basically everything has a place that kind of fits on either side of something, or above something, or below something. And that's when I recommend packing cubes are okay for things. If you have a lot of little things that are all the exact same type of thing. So like socks, for example, if you have a couple pairs of socks, putting all those in a little packing cube together so that you know that one is exclusively for socks. Just label it, exclusively for swimwear, exclusively for shoes. But it's when you start putting multiple things in a packing cube that you start to lose stuff. And you're like, I don't know where this is. I don't know where that is. Everything should have a designated place and should be labeled so that you know exactly, okay, all my socks are in here and they're kept here in this bag. All my, shoes are here and they're kept here in this bag. And you're laughing because it looks like that's where you've gone wrong. That's where you've gone seriously wrong, Allie.
And I have a tendency just to go for like the largest one and fit as much shit into one packing cube as I possibly can.
Mistake number one.
And then throw that in my suitcase. And it turns out that like the largest packing cube is almost the exact same size as my small suitcase.
Exactly.
So I'm like, what's the point? Am I using this right? Like,
exactly. Oh
so
my goodness.
I now see the errors of my way. I should break up socks in one, t-shirts in the other, small chunks.
See, yeah, I don't even put the clothes in a packing cube. The clothes are always outside of the packing cube. It's just the smaller multiple items. So again, socks, underwear, swimwear, shoes. Yeah. I put those things in packing cubes. My clothing is actually never in a packing cube because that's the stuff you're accessing.
So I think we are going to kind of wrap up this episode of Travel Snacks. And again, definitely Geneva has so much information when it comes to packing. And she does do this amazing, it's a packing session that she offers. And it's especially geared for like first time long-term backpackers or people who are maybe going on their first long-term trip and need some like help packing, knowing what to take, what type of bag, like all of that. Geneva can definitely help you out with that. And you can book that through her Instagram, which is at Unwrap Your Map, or her website, www.unwrapyourmap.com. And yeah, I mean, Geneva, is there, I guess, do you have any like closing words on packing?
I honestly, less is more. You'll always make it work. You'll always work with whatever it is that you have. And as long as you bring a little bit of a couple of different things, you'll, for the most part, be able to figure stuff out. And if not, you'll find friends who will figure stuff out for you and they will loan you things. But honestly, it'll save your back. It'll make your travels easier. And it's more enjoyable when you're not lugging things everywhere with you.
And we will include, of course, as always, all of Geneva's information in the episode description. And we'll also include like a couple of different links that you can use to kind of check out what we talked about today, especially the reversible clothing, which I personally am super pumped to check out. I'd like to thank you again, Geneva, for being on today's episode. And I'm excited to have you back for another travel snack soon. I think our next episode is going to be focused on being social while traveling solo and how to make friends. So I'm excited to kind of dig into that topic and hear more about kind of how hostels play into that whole scenario. So thanks again for being on.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed.
And if you have questions for Geneva, you can send us a message or leave us a voicemail on our hotline, 252-419-6004. And we will answer those questions in our next Travel Snacks episode. You can follow us on Instagram at Fun with Friends Podcast. And with that, get out there, try something new, and have some fucking fun. Bye.
There you have it. Thanks, as always, for listening to this week's episode. Be sure to tune in for the next one. And if you are looking for some entertainment or you're bored, I highly recommend going back and listening to some of our previous episodes. You can follow the Fun with Friends podcast on Instagram at Fun with Friends Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at FunFriendsPod1. We are also on Facebook. You can listen to the podcast on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. As always, please like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell your friends about the podcast and get the word out there about it. And as always, my friends, go out there, try something new, and have some fucking fun. Bye!